the after show. What'd you gain out of that one? I'm gonna get some water.
Well, I loved the way we ended it. It's just this great opportunity right now, again, for those of us who are home with our families and choosing the social isolation and taking it seriously. I mean, it is definitely uncomfortable, right? Like, I can't tell you how much I want to go out and go do something someplace and go back to some of my own, my old patterns, just, routines. But this is just such a great opportunity to just be rethinking life in general, right? I mean, it's definitely what I've probably spent 75% of my time thinking about these last few weeks. And then 25%, I'd say, gets sucked up back into that kind of fearful, the world is coming to an end. And even if it doesn't come to an end and, tons of grown-ups and older people die, what's going to happen with the kids? And I do have to say, we didn't really talk about that much on the podcast, but I know for me as a parent to two 13-year-olds and, a step parent to two 20-somethings, I just keep thinking, I don't know, I'm still planning to be here for another 50 years. So, but I do think about them. Like, what does the future look like? I mean, could you imagine, just like pause for a moment and think, age 13, if we were 13 today, just think about this. And there was a pandemic, like in our context, in our life context at age 13, like it's literally like you could have said, oh, I'm going to be doing middle school on the moon. Right. I mean, like, we can't even fathom. And yet somehow this seems almost normal. And it's like, and I have to say that my two kids, two 13-year-old kids are like, they're not freaking out. Like, on some level, like it's almost like, this is weird and it's strange. It's a little scary, but it's almost like with global warming and nuclear threat and everything that they've been living their whole lives, it's almost like, which on one hand, I'm grateful for, but that they have this level of resilience. But on the other hand, it's kind of scary because I think it brings us back to like this question about our passions and about life and about what are we setting them up for? I don't know.
Well, I think kids are normalized to resilience. They don't have the filter on yet, right? Like, maybe it's because they don't know, maybe because they're kids, but whatever it is, their normalization is resilience. I have to believe. I mean, it just, all you have to know that, just walk into a children's hospital, right? Like when I was in nursing school, the little 9-year-old getting chemo dripped in her veins while we played Candyland. And I tried to sit in that little bitty chair and I said, I'm not going to win. And she goes, you can't say that or you won't win. You have to be positive. She's getting chemo dripped in her veins. So I'm a firm believer kids are resilient. When you said that, when you talked about going back to sleep, when you talked about going back to sleep, maybe it's really us, because we're so normalized to, like you said, obesity, hello, me, all of this opioid crisis. We're so normalized to the violence. We're so normalized to it being normal, right? Like we're normalized to all of that horrible stuff, which is normal. At age 30, it's just normal. By age 30, all that's just normal. So thank God the kids have that resilience, because that's the life force coming into this planet. And, do you sense a lot of fear out of your kids?
They have had their moments.
Right.
With Bram, I sort of see a bit of sullenness in his eyes, where it's sort of like, it's not freaking out, it's not external, but for him, I think there's maybe a little bit more internal. I think with Sienna, she had a night where she was crying quite a bit and kind of catastrophizing a little bit, that kind of thinking. But I think the adults I've seen have reacted a lot more strongly than the kids, and and I think the kids, fortunately, even if they do have access to the internet and they have access to all this information, they're still focusing on, what, when we use that phrase, what brings them to life. Like, they're still focusing on their social relationships. They're focusing on the next stage in their schooling. They're doing some homework over what is now spring break for my kids. They're sort of focusing on those things that brings them some joy and pleasure. But at the same time, it's like, what I'm questioning in myself right now, as we were talking about in the podcast, is, yeah, if I were to ask them what they feel really passionate about right now, like, I don't know that they would have that answer. And
Well, then
yeah.
maybe phrase that a different way, honey. Maybe you just say, what brings you to life in this moment?
Yeah.
Right? It's the same thing you said. I think, and I wrote it down the minute you said it. What brings us to life in this moment? We don't know the next moment. We know that, but and I don't think we should put the word passion on it, because I think the word passion is loaded. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a loaded word that we use, because the minute you say passion, I extrapolate it out exactly like you do, my ultimate life goal that I should be doing that I'm not doing, right? Like, I'm passionate about a sunset. That's enough, right? Like. So I don't think we should use the word passion. For me, it's loaded. I think it's the same for you. But what brings us life in this moment? I mean, everybody can answer that question, and sometimes we won't have an answer for it. That's where we got to dig. Like, what does bring me to life? If I died tonight, would I regret anything? And then when you come up with those answers, then you can really say, okay, but what brings me life in this moment, that I am drawing a breath? The breath of life is within me, right? Like, I think you hit the nail on the head. What brings us to life?
Well, and
And
as
I
you're,
think,
oh, sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
no, I think your kids are resilient. The kids are the leader in that, because, like you said, you're watching them 24/7 because they're in your house now without any break. And I think you're watching them process, and they're watching you process, they're watching all their parents process. Dallas just went into where they have an infinite closing of schools, so I'm sure all parents went, what? But it's a new day, it's a new world, so parents are having to get creative. Parents are having to introduce themselves to their kids, I'm sure. Husbands are introducing to wives, and wives to wives, husbands to whatever it is. We're all reorienting, and we're all trying to reconnect in ways that we have never been forced to. So I think this question of what brings us to life in the face of death, in the face of these fears, in the face of this virus, in the face of the viral fear, the biggest virus being fear, what brings us to life? And I think if we can answer that in the moment, and it'll may be different than an hour for us, we know that every moment is a different answer, right? Because you and I experience a million things in the middle of an hour. Then I think that's the most key aspect of this moment, of what we're doing, not being, doing. I mean, being, not doing. Hey, don't do it, be it. Don't do it, be it. But yeah, I think that's crucial, and I think that's beautiful how you brought that. What brings us to life?
Yeah.
We'll do versus be next time, and next podcast I think it would be really good to talk about how we're managing the tools, like how you're managing the tools of navigating that with your family with 2 13-year-olds, how I'm doing that navigating my family, and how we're connecting and reconnecting. I think that's a really important, because all of this reorientation is about connection and
Yeah,
how we're being.
for sure.
All right, my love.
Love
Ah,
you.
thank you. Love you.